Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age. It is Saturday, December 20th, 10:30 a.m. And we don't normally cover these type of articles or issues, but it was brought up that it was interesting in a number of ways so that you can see how the multimedia system that is out there now really screws up justice pretty much for everybody. And before we start, I was asked to read this before we begin. This program is an analytical and educational discussion. It is based on publicly available media reports, secondary commentary, and hypothetical frameworks which may be incomplete, disputed, evolving, or later corrected. And we have to bring that up because we are talking about the movie Being Charlie, a 2015 American drama film directed by Rob Reiner and starring Matt Ellison and Nick Reiner. You'll know Nick from such other events as murdering his father and mother, and that occurred the other day. Since then, Hollywood has been up in arms. December 14th, 2025, American filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife, photographer and producer Michele Singer Reiner, were found dead with multiple sharp force injuries at their home in Brentwood. It's a beautiful home, by the way. Their son, Nick Reiner, was arrested later on the same day, suspicion of murder. Okay, now all we're going to do is talk a little bit about what went on there, which is that nobody knows. The indicator that everybody is using, and this is what's going to screw up things here. Everybody has put out a article, this, that, and the other thing. It's always the same thing. He has had a lot of problems with drugs and his brain. He's been in rehab between 15 to 17 times, depending on who you hear. Once again, disclaimer may not be true. He may never have gone to a rehab. He's had some problems with some different types of drugs, um, some psychological issues that they say, well, which also will change the story in a few minutes. Both of those things together have caused him to be homeless at times, this, that, and the other thing. Very hard to deal with. Um, and his parents took him to Conan O'Brien's. Yeah, Conan O'Brien, the Late Show host, for a Christmas party at which he must have creeped out half the audience in the room, supposedly from what everybody said, or the guests. I'm sorry, used to Conan with an audience, creeped out the people at the event. Uh, Rob disciplined him, and then Rob and the wife left him there. Of all things, right? You ghost your whatever child and leave him at Conan's house. Not too cool, Rob. The daughter the next day, Rob must have had a massage appointment. They came over, couldn't get an answer at the door, went to the daughter who lives across the street. She went over to the house and found the parents in bed and they were murdered or something. And then there we go. And then the manhunt went on for Nick. Nick was rounded up pretty fast. And since then, the family has procured a very high-end defense attorney for him. And people are already throwing out theories on what's going to occur. As this all went along, and you can't get around it if you're looking at YouTube, like for a decent old movie or something like that, because some of us refuse to pay for YouTube because why should we, right? And I came across one. I could not locate it again because it probably got buried when we started to try to access information off of it. And it was a psychologist, and he did a take on what he had heard or knew versus what was going on. And his was interesting because you just don't get around to killing your parents like this out of nowhere. People just think this shit snapped and that was it. Not all the time. Sometimes it's the drugs. I did know there was a fellow at one point that we were aware of, didn't know him very well, but he was on drugs crazy for days and days, and then he snapped, he killed his grandparents. Bad number, but supposedly he's rehabilitated. I just don't want him around me. And that's one type of situation. This situation seems to have gone further back because I will attribute this to that video. When I do find it, we will put it up. He supposedly has had a history going back before the drug. So, like when he was 14 or 15, he starts exhibiting this interest in drug abuse, I think, after his age of 15. Prior to that, he had issues with violence. He was manipulative, things of that nature. There are a number of psychopathies that he could have already been developing, which, you would just be you'd be guessing at because a number of things go that way. However, we're going to push along this other little theory here, and it comes out basically because of the fact it seems that Reiner, after all these rehabs, figured he knows his son better than the doctors do, and the doctors aren't helping. And he sort of lays the law down, I guess, at a few different time periods. But there are things that he does that I think he feels he is helping with, which are actually reinforcing the medical issue that is there. And once again, we have a disclaimer, so don't get crazy on this. But the thing is, people out there have to understand some things you can't cure yourself. And if this situation existed prior to drugs, it's a situation more serious. They're all serious. But if he was already starting to slip over to the dark side, the drugs were only going to amplify that action. Okay. There was always supposedly a need of manipulation there over, needing funds. He was homeless for a time, which means the parents had to have put him out on the street. I guess the idea was you will go to rehab or you will not live here, which is the old style, you know, not quite as enlightened as I would expect out of Rob Reiner, because he is sort of a pillar of wokeness. But there are examples which I heard on there of a situation where this son, Nick, was like, well, I've led this privileged life. I have a very hard time relating with the rest of the world and blah, blah, blah. And they bought it. So there is an example of your own doctrine, if it's true, your own doctrine coming back to roost, right? They allowed him to get away with not having to go seek more medical attention because he himself had been a victim of his own privilege. And this is why the only reason I was interested, there were a couple of other guys that were interested. The only reason I was interested in is people are say, oh, DEI and wokeness and all that, that doesn't really hurt you. It just means you can't work in a real restaurant or, as a police officer or whatever. No, this is a life and death issue when you start dealing with these phony pseudosciences and such. So he has had this situation going on. I'd make some notes. I'm sorry, this is a real off thing because I have real work to do. And so, what is occurring is supposedly, if we are to believe anybody, I guess we have to believe TMZ because they will have the notes directly from the defense attorney. And you're going to see a lot of that in this case. The defense attorney is from the area. He's a big fixer. He's a couple $1,000s an hour, and he is going to use TMZ and the rest of these media outlets as uh, a jury fixer, a poisoner of the jury pool prior to this case ever going forward. They've already ventured out there about the insanity plea, but in California, especially, nationwide in general, California in particular, the insanity plea does not get you what you think you're going to get. That goes back to John Hinckley Jr. when he shot the president. There were some things that were done there, and you should look that up yourselves so you understand that whole case of what went on there, what was allowed to occur, and what will never happen again. Similarly, people have brought up the fact this is reminding them of the Menendez brothers shooting because the family bought the defense attorney for the kid who killed the parents. But once again, there are a lot of factors, guilt, we're in this together, protect the family's image. The kid could say anything. He could say, my father interfered with me. That's why I had to kill him. My mother knew about it, so I had to kill her too. Blah, 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 blah. Obviously, he isn't what's called a family destroyer because he could have walked across the street and got the other sister too, right? So all this wrath, and it's obvious from what they said from the alleged amount of stabs And there's now another one here that he also cut their throats. So now, when you get into that level of barbarism, you've got a lot behind you. This wasn't a fight where, I'm sort of having to stab where I can stab. You're standing over two people that are probably asleep. We don't know that, but probably asleep when he does them. Okay. So a lot less chance. Reiner, I forget, he looked fairly tall. He may have been able to mix it up. You never know, right? Ran his mouth enough, so maybe he had to punch it out with some people. I don't know. So, that shows a clear, calculated methodology. Nobody says that the kid drank anything at the party, and they would know because there's already been a couple of other celebrities who have chimed in that were there because they can't stand not being in the spotlight. And it's not like they said he had a bottle of the half drank tequila in one hand and blow in the other. No, he's just there being creepy. And then this goes on and blah, blah, blah. And then hours later, the parents are getting it. So you're seeing somebody who is not on the drugs or alcohol that supposedly are the big problem in their life. That is going to affect the insanity plea because it shows a premeditation in there. There's a lot that's going to go on. And also that some people get the vain idea that you see on television that they're going to put you in a mental hospital forever and everything's just going to be lovely. That does not really go down. There is a ward in the prison system for the criminally insane. Now, I doubt they're going to be able to transfer him over to a civilian psychological prison on anything like this. And I don't see him getting it, if he's going to cop to this, maybe he goes for diminished capacity, something like that. But we don't know because we're not attorneys. I'm not an attorney. I do play one on TV, but I'm not an attorney now. And I would just say that there are a lot of variables there, and a number of them are not good in the fact that Reiner Sr. and his treatment of his son's mental illness almost becomes depraved indifference, I think you could call it. Those of you who are lawyers want to talk to it. Your son has known mental problems, which he had prior to this drug thing, which were never fully addressed. What you're going to have to do is have somebody, it's going to happen anyway. They're going to go back during discovery and try to get the medical records from every one of these rehabs that the kid went to. They're going to use the movie, which is supposed to be based on the kid's life. Now you're screwed up, right? You have a mental illness or incapacity of some type. Your father, who you don't seem to have a very good rapport with, makes a movie about it. And to make you feel better about things, makes you a producer. The thing that occurs with you being a producer, if you look at it from his point of view, is you're given money. It's like 10%, right? So it's the $3 million film, I think it said. So he gets $300,000 put into an account and he gets a production credit. And that is validating, believe it or not, under certain psychopathies, this is validating all the wrong things because when you're doing this and money or fame is what you see as the only things that are going on there. All right. And then you sit there and you have an entitlement issue to begin with. You're manipulative to begin with. You have these violent outbursts probably when you're not getting what you wanted. Now, he has been able to go with this film in 2015, which is 10 years ago. Uh, his self-narrative is now canonized. There's documentation because nobody knows where the movie ends and the world begins. His grievances are there, his distortions, because at the end of this, he's fine. He goes on to a career in stand-up comedy, right? Instead of murdering his parents, he's a stand-up comedian. Now, that's a serious distortion in reality or what reality could become. But that is in the film as well, which can also be brought into court and say, look, my father and I sat down. This is what was going on at the time. And then as things went along and he got difficult again, it was all taken away from me. So what happens is when you have individuals that have these coercive or antisocial traits and they perceived, I don't know, let me think of the best way to do this. So for any, go back. So there we have that story and we have what his story is. From there, any attempt to contradict that story, his parents decide to set boundaries, cut his money, which for the 300,000, they never says in there that he is a ward of the parents. So he has access to, I'm just using that number because it used to be producer took 10% of the budget. If it was less, let me know. If it was more, let me know. I would doubt Rob Reiner. The movie only made $34,000, I think, at the box office. It was a snore fest, but Rob was able to use other people's money to finance his kids' lifestyle, pretty much. Let's be honest about it, right? So if all of a sudden you're setting these boundaries, you're cutting these funds, you're enforcing consequences because you never made another movie with him, right? Can feel to the son, not that Rob is just rejecting him, but he's erasing him, if you know what I mean. So somebody who is involved with this coercive or antisocial traits, they perceive that their reality is being erased or humiliated. It can, in most chances, be a reliable precursor to retaliatory violence, which this could easily be. Whatever was said at that Conan party was probably just the trigger was half pulled, the rest of it was pulled the rest of the way. So there have been things that have been going on like this. All right. So there is something going on which is going to have to be kept inside of the family. I think you're going to see if we're going to take this kind of case and look at it again when it happens. It won't be the crime of the century. This is going to go pretty fast. Because there's going to be things in there that the family is not going to want out in the open, I would gather from what we're seeing. Those of you who are interested in psychology or psychiatry, you can go online and see these different things about his manipulations, his violent streak, and all this. And this is pre-drugs. And then do that work and then say, now let's add heroin or cocaine or whatever into the mix over a time period. Let's have abandonment issues. Let's have strict walls being put up between, is it love? Is it parental? What is it? And things of that nature. And I'm not saying that this kid is an innocent little lamb. It takes a lot of strength to stab two people a lot, especially people you know. And from what I've heard, it's not something where the famous, you hear about it once in a while in other cases. They'll cover the face or they'll stage it where they look more relaxed, things of that nature. None of that supposedly coming on, but also the whole place isn't a slaughterhouse, allegedly. So you have that as well. I don't want to keep getting into the grisly details, but that has a lot to do with the pathology of what occurred. Violence is violence, rage and violence come together in a lot of situations. We had the situation when we tried to explain what's going on with everybody raping all the women in England that come from other countries. But that's a story for another day. So these are some things to think about when you're seeing this thing. A lot of it, obviously, the boy is definitely 70%. If he did it, because he had to have gotten cleaned up, he had to have done this, he had to have done that, where the clothes that you wore, because obviously this is going to make a mess, not as much as if everybody's heart's pumping, but it's going to make a mess. They're going to have to say, we've got all that stuff. We have all the bloody clothes. We have the knife. We have the this. We have the that. He's got cuts on his hands where he slipped, things like that. That's the kind of stuff you get when you're doing a deal like this. Once they have all that together, then you'll know more. But also in there, we have to understand that this guy, Reiner, the father, and the mother to some extent, although she doesn't seem to have much to say about it, through their own ignorance and basically through their own embracing of these stupid DEI ideas, uh, kind of brought, I didn't say brought it on himself because everybody will go crazy, did not help themselves in the long run by exposing themselves to these pseudosciences, Trump derangement syndromes, and things like that. So that's all I can do for you without us getting sued to death. But when you see these kind of cases, you really should look back. Never look, that's why the Charlie Kirk thing is never going to get solved the way everybody wants it to be. That's why this is going to go the way it does. Not so much the Brown University. That's a whole other ball game. We're not even going to get into that. It's going to take weeks, and we don't have the money to do that correctly because there is a gosh darn lot of stuff in that one. But otherwise, this is what we have for you now, and that's it. Talk to you later on.